This is Karina, and you're listening to Bold, Brown and British, a weekly podcast where we discuss what it means to be a brown person in a Western world. We've spoken about colorism, third culture identity, and dating, amongst many others in this podcast. So if this sounds like the type of content that you want to hear, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also message us on Instagram. The handle is @BoldBrownAndBritish, or drop us an email via our website at www.boldbrownbritish.com. So without further ado, let's get on with this week's episode.
It's funny, I've been wanting to record this podcast for 3 months, but finding people that are comfortable enough to kind of come out and, I guess, be willing to experience, share their experiences without the fear of the kind of what is going to happen to me. I'm not comfortable with people knowing. What if people recognize my voice? There's just so much fear and anxiety that can come from that. And I mean, I know people personally that are genuinely scared of, like, this is a life or death kind of deal. Obviously, today we're going to be talking about this idea of being LGBTQ in the kind of Desi community. Not necessarily South Asian, but Desi community or brown community. There's a lot of fear about wanting to talk about this, even if you are within the community, just because it's, some people are scared about what is going to happen to me. Things like honor killings, unfortunately, are still very much a thing. I'm just glad to have found you guys who's just, beautiful people committed to representation, to being part of a really powerful community, I think. So first of all, I actually want to start off by saying how proud I am and for thanking you for kind of agreeing to be here. I think it takes an immense amount of guts and courage to do so. So, clap for all of you.
Hey.
Hey. So I guess I wanted to start off by, what do you identify as?
I identify as bisexual, Muslim, of East and Southeast Asian, mixed Asian heritage, and my pronouns are she, her.
I don't identify as anything because I don't like to label myself, but I've dated girls in the past and now I'm dating a guy. Does that make me bi? I'm not sure, but for me, it's always been about the connection. So if a bottle of water and I had a connection, then I would date that bottle of water. So for me, there's, as long as they can make me laugh and there's that attraction there, that's all that counts for me. So personally, I don't like to identify as anything, if that makes sense.
That's a good point as well, because maybe you don't, I think the idea of labeling can be pigeonholing yourself, not just in this scenario, but in a lot of scenarios. So I think that's a valid point.
I've identified as many different queer labels, just depending on who I'm talking to. Since I've mostly dated women, I've just always found it easier to call myself gay or lesbian. But in hindsight, now, I'd say I was pansexual, still figuring it out. But if I'm to post it somewhere, I just say queer. I'm a queer woman of Mauritian heritage.
Sure, so my pronouns are he and him, and I identify a little bit as what the person just before me just said as queer, just because it's a more inclusive word for me, and it's still a process. Like, sexuality evolves while we age, so it's still a process, and I've been with men and women, so it doesn't make me bi. I'm not sure of it, so I prefer the term queer, and I'm looking for connection with someone and not someone's genitals. So yeah, that's me, and I'm from Indian heritage, but I grew up on Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean, so we don't have a connection with the Asian continent, but our ancestors left India in the 18th century?
I'm more as an ally. Lots of friends who are gay, bi, queer, or anything in between. My cousin as well is trans and is gender fluid. So I'm just here to kind of speak on their behalf, because it's a difficult time for them to even just speak up, and they didn't want to talk on this on the show and get identified.
Hi, my pronouns are she, her. I identify as queer. I really only date women. So also like I go with gay, lesbian, whatever. But I do feel like queer is the most inclusive term, because, there's always space for dating a guy, but probably not. Like everyone said, like, sexuality is fluid. Like Prince Zuko's pretty hot when I was a kid, but that was about it. Oh yeah, I'm Indian, I'm Punjabi.
I guess historically, queer people have been celebrated and represented among, like, I'm talking about, like, the gods and the goddesses, and it just feels like somewhere along the line we ruined that. I think it was this idea of, say, for example, shamans and healers being non-binary. They were seen to have special gifts. Hindu deities, a lot of Hindu deities are they're gender fluid, essentially. So I guess I wanted to ask, why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that this idea of, like, being queer suddenly became something that's air quote abnormal, rather than, well, yeah, this is just how it is?
I think that was to do with colonization.
Mm.
An article I was reading, because even in indigenous cultures in Native America, two-spirited individuals were sort of seen as a person to kind of be revered, and were sent as political figures to negotiate with colonialists that would come from Europe. And I think that sort of that those binaries that came from sort of Western civilization were enforced on cultures and countries, and which sticks today. That's my take on it.
I think you're right. I think this derogatory perception does come from the remnants of the British colonial adversion, which, I mean, like, this, ironically, the podcast is called Bold, Brown and British, so I'm not really sure how we do that, but it's also ironic because now it seems to be flipped, where Western countries are making bigger strides in celebrating Pride, whereas we being the kind of South Asian or the Desi brown community, seem to be stuck in that age and unable to kind of come out of this perception, this long-stemmed perception of it being.
I think we're still trying to suppress it. I feel like it's, well, certainly in this community, I'm Mauritian, by the way, Mauritian Catholic, and in this sort of community, it's very much suppressed. We just don't talk about it in family settings, or, I had quite a traumatic coming out, session with my parents, and years later we still don't talk about it. We still brush it under the carpet, like, it's never happened. And I feel like it's going to be a generational thing as well, because if we don't talk about it, then their kids don't talk about it, and it just never comes to light. It never becomes a normal subject to talk about.
Going off that, when did you first kind of realize that I don't identify as kind of what the norms of society seem to be, the whole, like, a guy must only like a girl? And when did you first kind of realize that? How did you navigate kind of telling your parents or your family about it? Because it can be something that's a really scary thing to do.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, I moved to Mauritius during my teenage years. So during the peak rebellion, that's when they decided to take me back to Mauritius. Big mistake. And then I was going to an all-girls school as well. And within my family, we weren't allowed to talk about boyfriends or about, even going to sleep over someone's house, completely frowned upon. So I don't know, I just saw other girls getting together in an all-girls school, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll try this, and ended up trying it for the next few years. So again, this was very hush-hush, didn't tell my parents anything. But then I came back here for university, and there was a website called High Five. It's a bit like Facebook back in the days. And my brother came across me and my girlfriend and decided to tell my parents this. Anyway, my parents sent me a message saying, we're disowning you, don't come back home anymore, you're dead to us, blah, blah, blah. So I still had, I was going to surprise my brother for his birthday. So I'd already booked a ticket to Mauritius. So I went there anyway. And because they told me not to come back home, I ended up staying at my girlfriend's place. And then she left for work one day, and 2 police officers came to the door and took me away and put me in a mental hospital. So they had essentially declared me crazy. So yeah, so I stayed in the mental hospital for about 4 days, 3 nights and 4 days, and managed to convince them that, major mistake, won't ever do this again. So then I managed to go back home, and I escaped. I woke up in the middle of the night. My girlfriend came to collect me in a taxi, and then I just fled. And I ended up not speaking to my parents for probably a good 3-4 years. But fast forward a few years later, and we are okay now. But again, it's in a period that we just don't talk about, and I don't think we'll ever talk about it. But again, I'm not sure if it's a cultural thing or the fact that I was their first child and I'm brown and they just had no idea what to do with this. But yeah, that's just what I went through.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I can't imagine the kind of courage it takes for you to. I guess you didn't come out to them, but
no, I didn't.
But the courage that it takes to stay true to yourself when you're being told that it's basically this.
I was talking about this the other day. I'm not sure if we can blame them or not, because they don't know any better. They come from a generation where it's something which they're not used to, and for them they were just, they were just trying to protect their child. So I don't know if I blame them for doing that, but yeah, I'm just glad that we've got to a point now where it doesn't really matter what happened.
I think in Mauritius as well, because it's such a small island, family reputation is such a huge part of the culture. So I think protecting the image sometimes has just passed down through the generations, and sometimes that older family are blinded to real life issues that we experience today in our identity, because marriage and reputation, and even just marrying within religion to the right people is it's a big deal. So I'm sorry that you had to.
They are very concerned about what people would say.
No, it's horrible to still hit. Well, yeah, because obviously still campaigning for conversion camps to be banned, obviously, on how horrible it is, and that idea that just how you identify or how you feel isn't a lifestyle choice.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that. The violence of being outed as well. It wasn't your choice. So it's just awful. And I agree with what the other person was saying. When something happens in our families, all our community learns about it in ours. So from my experience, I'm not out to my family. They don't speak English, they will never find this. So that's my privilege. But my sister, who is 4 years older than me, so she's in her 30s now, early 30s, she was engaged with a man a few years ago, and she was, he broke up with her, which was, I would say, the worst period ever for my family, because when your daughter, who is supposed to be engaged, is dropped by someone else's family, it's the worst shame ever for you. So my parents were sad for my sister, but they were also very worried about the whole gossiping and going to the temple and going to the bank and seeing your cousin when you go to the bank. Like it's just like when you come out, basically your family comes out too. So it's double pressure and double pain and violence for you, because everyone will know about it in seconds.
It's the shame. Well, for them, it's the shame associated with not being normal. Anything that deviates away from normal, like how society views you, is just massively frowned upon.
Yeah, it's just ingrained homophobic attitudes, isn't it?
I was just thinking it's also the image of the LGBTQIA culture as well, which tends to be quite different from traditional Asian settings. I actually grew up in a homophobic area of London, and it was actually safer for me to be queer in a Malay Muslim country at that time compared to where I grew up in, which was a London suburb in northwest London. Because I grew up with in the days of Section 28, so that was when you weren't allowed to even mention LGBTQIA in the education system. So we knew that there were teachers that were queer. They weren't allowed to discuss or be there for queer students who were questioning their sexual orientation, and also parents, queer parents. They didn't get a say either. And the unofficial school anthem in my time was this song called Boom Bye Bye. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's an early 90s song about shooting gay men.
Oh my God.
Yeah. What? So that was what the kids looked up to in my school. You hear the words batty man, lezzy, dyke uttered to cuss someone down all the time. Whereas my friends in Malay Muslim countries were buying expensive presents and going on expensive dates with their girlfriend. Meanwhile, I wasn't allowed to exist. So those days were quite tough. So I would say that nowadays it's just really, really a waste to actually see that the culture has changed, whereby Southeast Asian countries that have included their queer communities in their culture and in their society, not perfectly, but have allowed them to exist, are no longer allowing them to exist, because we had madrasas led by the trans community. We have queer politicians, we have queer household names, and they don't talk about their sexuality. But the thing is, with a lot of Asian culture, nobody actually does. That's just what we don't do. We don't even talk about boyfriends. It's just like, bam, you're expected to get married without, I don't know, by some fairy godmother who expects this perfect lifestyle for you. I was like, what? Okay, I don't know how that's done. Traditionally, my dad's village, if you spoke on the phone too much to someone, you were expected to get married to them, and they make a hobby out of marriage as well. I mean, okay, that's going off at a tangent. They are taking the piss when they do that, but it's just really, really wasteful to actually see that all those cultures that have accepted LGBTQIA queer communities before, they've actually missed that, just narrowly missed that time whereby they could have actually gained more presence online, because at that time the internet didn't really exist, so we couldn't actually show how fantastic our cultures were. And now we've got this dynamic whereby we're actually trying to compete religiously in Southeast Asia with other countries to look more Muslim, because Southeast Asian Muslims are not taken seriously. We're seen as the handbags and shopping malls of Islam. So as a response, you've got all these new generations of Southeast Asian Muslims in Southeast Asia who are saying no to LGBTQIA, when their uncles and aunties and cousins of the older generation may have existed quite peacefully without all that homophobia. And it's really, really strange.
It's also interesting that you say, it largely stems from the younger generation as opposed to kind of the older ones, because I guess to some extent the larger ones, the older generation was like, again, it's just a phase, they'll grow out of it, and they almost forced you to be someone you're not, but forced you to be in air quote normal relationships, like, oh, you just get married and that's it. You don't even talk about, like, even if you were, you didn't identify as queer, you still wouldn't talk about like being with your husband or your wife. You just don't talk about that side at all. You don't talk about being in love, and how dare you hold your partner's hand out.
If I could intimacy or anything.
Yeah, I smile at my phone at a meme, and my mom would be like, who's that boy you're talking to?
And you know what, we're supposed to invent the Kama Sutra. So
exactly.
We're supposed to invent sensuality and sex and whatever, and there we are going, no, just keep it all under the lids, and bottle it up.
I hate this idea of and I don't use this word lightly, but like gaslighting people when they do come out to, oh, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. Of course it is. There's a huge difference in saying it's not a big deal who what you identify as, who you love. I'm going to love you regardless. And saying it's not a big deal. Can we just talk about something else? And I think often the culture and the kind of, I guess, mentality is the latter. Like, it's not a big deal. Why does it matter? It matters because there are people that do still feel suppressed, that do feel like they can't be their true selves especially in a pandemic. And can you imagine if you've not come out to your families and you're genuinely scared about doing so, about kind of letting your family down, then your culture down, and you're not, maybe you haven't quite figured out where you fit into this kind of community in the first place. You're trying to navigate that, and you're stuck with prejudiced parents, and you'll make the courageous decision to say, okay, I am queer, and somebody goes, yeah, so what's the big deal? That's so derogatory. That, like, it really annoys me, I think. And it's this, I think it was like the first active NFL player, is it Carl Nassib, I think, that came out, and this basically, it was the, who cares? Of course people care. I just think it's just a shitty response to somebody coming out just to say, who cares?
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like it might also be a form of like denial, because like no one will like believe you. Like, I remember, okay, so basically I like always knew, but was I remember even in like sixth grade or something, I was like, some kid had like, I remember checking out this girl, and this kid had asked me in social studies, like, are you a lesbian? And I was like, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's whenever you like girls. And I was like, oh no, like, I like Justin Bieber. Absolutely not. Like, that, I should have just said yes. Like, that was not a good cover up. But I was really into Justin Bieber for a really long time. Just had to sell my story.
Fair, you did look like a girl, if that helps, at some stage.
I was literally just gonna say, like, that probably wasn't
Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus, the same person.
Right, exactly. Like, I think it was very telling that I picked Justin Bieber. And then when I went to college, though, I had gotten a scholarship and moved across the country. So that's when I was like, okay, I can like be myself. And I still didn't like know if I would ever come out, because I remember when I was little, there was the cook that helps my grandpa. He had asked my dad to buy like a pink sweater and pink nail polish. And my dad was like, absolutely not. And I was like, why? It's not that big of a deal. And he was like, no, like, if he goes back to the Gaon or like his village, like, they're going to kill him. So no, for being gay. And I just knew right then and there, like, okay, it's like definitely not safe to be queer. And at that point, like, even when things were legalized in the United States, I still didn't feel like that included me. Like, good for you, but that doesn't include me. I have my OCI card, so my life's a little different. But here's the thing, like, I am kind of privileged in the sense where part of my family is, I'm like, my dad grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, but he's Indian. But then my mom's like straight from Delhi. So I do have some family that like lives in New York, and they're like very liberal. So my aunt was the first person I'd ever told. And all she said was, the lesbians down the street have a great relationship. They like, women actually communicate unlike men. So you should totally go for it. And so I was like, cool. And she was like, we're like obsessed with avocados. It's so weird. But my aunt was like, make sure you go to a Mexican restaurant, because if she doesn't order extra guac, then she's weird. Like, that's a red flag. Like, that was our conversation. But I still was like, okay, like I would never tell.
At least she normalized it. Like, she didn't make you feel like, you know, a lesser human being. She was like, yeah, cool, I'm down for it. You know, like, let's just treat it as normal, which is exactly the reaction you want in a way.
Right. So initially we were like smooth sailing. Because I was like playing my chess pieces correctly. I knew who to tell, so I would have a good experience. But, you know, eventually I knew I would like have to tell my parents. So me being like, also, let's remember, I'm on the other side of the country. So I don't have to do anything in person if I don't want to, because my safety comes first. So I just FaceTimed my mom and played Bad at Love by Halsey on the ukulele. And at that time I was really trying to go that I was like bi, to like kind of ease everyone into it. And I was like, oh, she sings about I was like, oh, she sings about girls and guys because she likes both, just like me. Okay.
What did she say?
My mom was confused and thought I was joking. But then my cousin was like, no, like Bibi's being serious. And then she was like, but like there was no sign. Everyone was like, there was no signs that you were not straight, because, you know, like I'm very like femme presenting or whatever. Okay, it's like a basic, nobody believed me.
What signs would there be? Like, I don't understand. What is like? Is
you
there
have to wear like baggy jeans? Like you have to be like, if you're a girl, the obvious signs is that, I don't know, you wear boxer shorts, for example,
right?
Like
or you wear baggy jeans or baggy t-shirts. You're not very feminine. You don't like makeup.
Yeah.
Those are the signs, basically.
The butch
I guess
image.
what they
Butch signs, yeah.
And so then, but at this point also, like my mom had already written me a 5-page letter about how I'm not the daughter she wanted for like other reasons. So I also just like wasn't that like I was already desensitized to like all the hate I was about to get. You know what I mean? Like for other reasons. So I was just kind of like,
listen, I've already laid you down. What, like I might as well. Like, if
one more.
I'm gonna do this,
let you down even more.
Let's just keep going. So then, but it was still like, okay, like we'll stay hush hush as long as it was like, it's not, we'll never talk about it and no one else ever needs to know. And also like, again, I was on the other side of the country, not really speaking to anyone anyways. But then I was in San Francisco, and, you know, I had this girlfriend at the time. I thought very much so in love, and was like, wow, like I would want us to go to India. Like, what if I wanted to get married one day? And I don't know what came over me. We're not together, by the way. I'm very much so single. But at the time, I don't know what came over me, where I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. Like, the India family's going to know. Everyone's about to know. And so I made a Facebook post, because my family in Texas is super homophobic. Like, they think all gay people should be hung. Like, literally, that's what I was told. So they were talking like mad shit about me. I was kind of, you know, petty. And I was, you know, took pictures of me going to the neighborhoods in San Fran, and was just like, you know, for all the family members that keep talking about me and keep asking questions behind my back, yes, I am queer and I'm proud of it, with like all these rainbow emojis. And post. Wow, my mom was livid. She was ready to kill me. Like, literally, this is right before my dad's big birthday party too. So she was like, you just can't come home. Like, you're not welcome to the birthday party. You're not welcome back at all. And I was like, okay, I've been kicked out like how many times now? Like, okay. And so again, desensitized to all this already. So luckily though, like I said, half my family is super chill. So then they convinced my mom to let me come. And then now she still says homophobic things, like, and she thinks it's like her prerogative, but we've been working on it, and, you know, it is what it is. But I haven't gone back to India since, and that's what scares me. Like, I keep trying to be like, I'm going to go back. Like, I need to see my Nani and Baba. Like, they're all getting old, but I don't know if I'm ready for that.
I love the fact that you're so positive about all this and that you're like, yeah, listen, it happened. I am who I am. We just deal with it. And that's such a strong personality and strong reaction, like in the best way possible.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just like, I guess I just realized, like, the thing is, especially in our community, because of like log kya kahenge, like what people are always going to think about you, what they want. Like, at one point in my life, I was living on food stamps next to a crack house in New Orleans, Louisiana. And people still had the audacity to tell me I had a cushy lifestyle. Listen, people are going to see what they want to see. All I can do is just keep being authentically myself. And what they think, what they see, that's their perception. And that's a them problem. It's not a me problem, because I just have love in my heart. You want to hate? That sucks. That's really sad. But you can keep hating. I just don't have the energy for that. So, anyways, that's where that thought process comes from.
And also, I think it's a question of not letting your past rule your present as well. Like, you know, when I came up, well, not came up, but when the whole thing exploded, you know, there was a lot of hatred towards my parents. But I'm glad that we're now in a point where that's subsided, it's gone. But again, you don't want to always be living in the past. You want to make use of the present, and, you know, parents are not going to be around forever. The last thing you want is regret when, you know, they aren't around anymore. So that's how I see it anyway.
And I think it's also the part and parcel of being brown, regardless of kind of whether you're queer or not, is always this expectation of anything you do will always affect your family, right?
Exactly.
And I find I'm the eldest daughter of my family, and also like the eldest for among my mom's side. The expectation that comes with that, because I know anything I do is going to set a precedence for kind of, you know, my cousins or my sister. It's really intense, and especially when you're navigating through a tough time, whether that be being queer, whether that be, you know, mental health. There's so many kind of challenges that you could have. Sometimes it's just like, how do I be brown and British at the same time? Or like, how do I be American and brown? Like, what does that even feel like? That's a minefield in itself, let alone, you know, other things that could kind of factor into that. It's so that the heaviness of every decision having to be this profound thing.
Yeah, I would say, I think the best advice I could ever give anyone is to get yourself a Desi therapist. Because I've gone through lots of different therapists, because there came a point in life where I had realized that I wanted better for myself. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go to therapy, like whatever. People are gonna say what they want to say, I don't care. And I'm very proud that I go to therapy. And so my Pakistani therapist, though, we worked on this a lot. And she would always just remind me, like, for example, I wanted to go to grad school, for mental health counseling, actually, but no one wanted me to, because I could be a doctor, not like not a therapist, you know, whatever. And I really thought about like not going back to school, like not applying to grad school, because of all the comments I was getting from everybody. And my therapist was just like, is this your life or is it their life? Like, are you going to regret not going back to school? Because like, they're not going to be the ones who have to deal with that consequence. It's you. And then I was talking to somebody who said that she's like European, and she couldn't decide if she wanted to go back to Europe or live in the United States. So she said that she was like, you know what, I don't want to regret it. She moved back to Europe, realized she made the wrong decision, and she just came back. And I guess what I realized is like, you can always change tracks. And that's what I just always remind myself, that like, I can go with the flow or be the flow. So I can make a decision, see how it goes, and then I can change it. If needed be, I can regroup. But either way, at the end of the day, I'm the one living with the consequences of my decisions. No one else. So people can give their opinions all they want, but they're not the ones dealing with it. It's me.
How has your experience, it's a very broad question, but how has your experience being Muslim and queer or bi?
Back in the day, it was really, really scary, because you hear all these stories about violence against queer Muslims. But I guess it's quite a bit of a journey, really. But yeah, as I said before, it is quite a bit of a journey. And it's important to surround yourself with people that you feel are supportive of you. As a bisexual person, the scene that we have, the bisexual scene that we have, even though it's got a way to go, it always tries to make efforts to be inclusive. So the common problems that you see in terms of facing Islamophobia and the queer scene, with the bisexual scene in particular, I've noticed that they try to steer away from that, and that they're always open to discussion. Either that, or I just don't surround myself with arseholes. Maybe I'm lucky that way, or maybe I'm also a bit scary because for some reason, it might be my accent, it might be the fact sometimes I wear niqab, or I might be just downright rude. People tend to get a bit scared with arguing with me. But in terms of embracing both identities, I think the acceptance starts with yourself, really. And there shouldn't be this choice on whether you've got to choose between your religion or your ethnic identity or any other aspect of your identity, and your sexual orientation. They're all part of you. They're all part of you. And that can't be a much more important lesson to me and message to me to keep me going in order to accept who I am. And we can all stand by each other in our own different ways. We don't all have to be loudmouths. We don't all have to be activists, but we can, in our own way, help. And also with the biphobia, a lot of people think that we're privileged just because we can fit in different circles, as in, oh, we can fit into the straight circle, we can fit into the gay circle. Absolute bollocks, really. And I'm sorry, I do swear quite a lot, I know. You see, because bisexuality isn't measured as a 50-50 scale. You might prefer one gender more than another gender. It's also not about binaries. I don't believe it's about binaries. It's either same gender or other. And I don't think it's a good idea for other people or other communities to try and define your experiences for you. There's always a way to tell them, no, sorry, that's not your story to tell. It's our story to tell. Just being a stubborn arse, I guess, in my case. That's how I've got over it.
Yeah, and I guess biphobia, a lot of people that I know that are bi, often if they're in a relationship of the opposite gender, they just won't say that they're bi. They'll just say, they're just kind of be like, well, look, why stir, something and kind of have that conversation if I don't need to? I don't know if that's kind of the right or the wrong way. I'm just kind of, I guess, speaking up for kind of my friends who have kind of said that to me, of like Pakistanis and the Bengalis. And I think that's also, it's a big thing in a lot of kind of bi communities. I don't know if you kind of disagree or agree, but a lot of people are kind of, not scared. I don't think scared is the right word. I think they're just apprehensive about revealing.
I'd say there's a lot of stigma attached to being labelled as bisexual and identifying as bisexual. You've got, if you're a woman and you're bisexual, you're instantaneously seen as a sex object. And if you're Asian bisexual, try typing that on Google. What you'll get is a whole load of porno sites. So I think with your average person, I don't think you would want to be associated with that. You wouldn't want to live with that, unfortunately. And if you are a man and you're bisexual, what will happen is that in the gay world, you don't exist. You're treated as invisible. You're seen as confused. You're seen as either straight or gay. And in the straight world, you're treated as a health hazard. If you read the Agony Aunt columns, and it's about a woman who writes in saying that her boyfriend is bisexual, what shall she do? The first thing the Agony Aunt will say is, get him tested. Get him tested for HIV, AIDS, STDs. Whereas if it's a similar scenario, i.e., oh, my boyfriend is straight, don't need to mention that he's straight, but he's been sleeping around, etc., etc. There's no mention of STDs or getting himself tested. It's just dump him, So there's all these stigmas that come with bisexuality and being identified as bisexual and even coming out as bisexual. And I think that indirectly it does affect us in a way, but we are an actual growing community in terms of establishing a scene for ourselves. There's a gay scene and there's a lesbian scene that unfortunately has always been underfunded, but has always been there. And both lesbian and gay scenes have always had more prominence and more, they've had more presence in the LGBTQIA world. I'm really happy to actually see that the trans community as well is building up in so many ways that strengthens them. And I hope that I can actually see that in the bisexual scene, because I'm really, really proud of the bisexual community and what we can offer. I think one day we are actually going to get there whereby we will be a community that people will understand a lot more. And the privilege is not there. We still have a lot of internal issues in terms of, like, we actually are, there's a higher rate of mental health issues within the bisexual community. And I think that the isolation and misunderstanding of the community itself has a lot to do with that. So I hope that these discussions will happen, and I hope that they will happen very soon. And we've got a lovely flag. I love the pink, purple and blue flag we've got. So there.
We were talking about how the trans community is finally getting some kind of light and power and voice. And hopefully this will go on and it won't be just a moment. But I'm actually very shocked and surprised by how targeted they are in the press every day here in this country. It's just insane, the amount of violence they have to go through just by existing. And I'm kind of lost because I think in terms of figures, they're only 2% of the population or something. So why that much violence for just 2% of the population? It's insane. But obviously it's a political argument, and like it's a way of getting far-right ideas in the debate and in front of the media newspapers.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that, like, even in like I can speak for Bangladesh. So every time I've gone to Bangladesh, every time there's been someone who is trans or, you know, hijra, as we call it there, as soon as, and okay, like there's always two sides to this argument, but every time they come in, you'll see all the parents like grabbing their children, being like, oh my God, no, stay away from them. And, you know, because, and I get it, like, because they haven't had any rights, they've had to resort to violence themselves, you know, so in order to get money, in order to get food, in order to get basic rights, they've had to adopt a way that's much more violent, because otherwise they're just not seen. They're not treated as humans. They're not seen. So they've had to, you know, resort to, I guess, extremes to some extent. Some people will like throw snakes on you and things like that. And it's not ideal. So I understand, like, they have a part to play, but that's a reaction. That's a reaction to people mistreating them for generations and them thinking that this is the only way we're going to survive. This is a survival reaction, not a, you know, no one's just like, you know what, I feel like throwing snakes on someone because why not? But because people are having these reactions. And I remember I was in a shop and I was with my aunt and they just kind of literally grabbed their child and walked away. And this trans person is like, look, I'm just here to buy my sari. Like, honestly, you don't have to be scared. They were being genuinely really gentle and nice. And they're like, stay away from me, you know, like, and I'm just standing there being like, that's disgusting. Like, that behavior is disgusting. I appreciate it, you know, you're saying that kind of in Western media, but I think it's just all over. I think trans people are, they're much more violently targeted, I would say. But I don't know whether because there's a lot more discussions happening about kind of, when you think of pride, most people think about lesbian, gay, or to some extent bisexual. I mean, I don't have anyone that is trans, so I'm kind of assuming a lot of things here. But I feel like a lot of people don't talk about being trans and the experiences of being trans as openly. Maybe because they're scared, maybe because they're like, you know what, I don't want to go through that. You know, even within the LGBT community, there's kind of levels of discrimination between even in that community itself.
I find that the older generation of certain self-appointed feminists, they can be very, very problematic. And they just don't speak up for the rest of the feminist community either. But they are extremely transphobic, and it is just so infuriating because you know how it feels to be discriminated against. You've lived through that era, and now you're actually just dragging another marginalized community through the shit. You know, another group of women through worse crap than you might have been through yourself. And it's worse because you're actually, I mean, you've gone through it before and you want to pass it on. What kind of bullshit is that?
Honestly, I think when we're talking about, I think what people tend to do is they'll put someone else down to try and push themselves up. And instead of advocating for change for all of us, for equality for all of us, it's like, oh no, I'm going to run faster in this race by pushing you back. And that's just, I don't understand that mindset. I think it's disgusting. It's so hateful. But I do see a lot of like feminists do that. And I don't think you can be a true feminist or activist unless you believe in equality for all.
I'm nodding my head, but my camera is off. One of the reasons is because my niqab doesn't match my cleavage. So I'm really sorry. I absolutely agree with what everyone is saying. I am nodding my head.
I love that. Like, I have a fashion emergency. I'm so sorry.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think the reason why these women fight against trans women is just, it's a defense mechanism, I think, invented and nurtured by the patriarchy. So basically, while these women fight, we are safe and we do our stuff as men. So let them fight. We don't have to do anything.
So what would you guys are proud to be kind of in the queer community, but there are a lot of people that are, I guess, either beginning their journey into kind of discovering who they really are, exploring that, or sometimes, especially in COVID, a lot of people have been forced back into really prejudiced families where they've almost been, I don't know, like I guess they've had to suppress who they are again after kind of come out, and they've had to suppress themselves and go, air quote, back into the closet, so to speak. What would your advice be, or to kind of those people that might still be struggling at the moment?
There's no right or wrong way to be who you are. I can only give an example of a mate of mine. She was discovering her sexual orientation and she was from a middle-class Chinese background. I don't think her employers definitely weren't accepting of her, but she felt pressured to turn butch just because she was attracted to girls. And the crowd that we hung out were quite tomboyish. And she liked wearing platforms. And they were like, no, you can't wear those. They're not butch enough. So she was being told, you can't be like this. You can't work at a wedding shop, because she worked at a wedding shop. And they said, no, you can't work here because you're a tomboy. And then she was getting other kinds of shit from the queer community because she wasn't the right, and in inverted commas, image to be butch or to be queer. So I think in terms of starting your journey, just bear in mind that there is no right or wrong way to be who you are. Just be yourself. And that itself is a journey. And it's one that actually, when you find out how absolutely fucking fabulous you are, is a journey to look forward to.
I think you've hit the nail right on the head, because in terms of, what advice would you give to someone in that situation? It's hard to tell because everyone's story is so different. you know, everyone's got different feelings, everyone's got different set of parents, different upbringing. So it's hard to sort of give any kind of advice apart from what you've said. Just be true to yourself and trust your gut instinct as well. I know that, you know, in the Asian community, you have a lot of aunties, a lot of uncles, cousins, everyone's got advice for you, you know, but at the end of the day, just stay true to yourself and just go with your own gut feeling and that sixth sense that you have.
I would agree with that. And I would say also, you're always, it's going to be a lifelong journey, and you're going to have internalized feelings of all sorts that you're going to have to work through as well. And the thing is, just no one gets to tell you your story. It's your story, and they're going to try. But you get to be you, prioritize your safety, and there's no right or wrong answer. Whether you have decided not to come out yet because it's not safe, or whether you're like, you know, fuck it, I'm going to do whatever the hell it is I want. Amazing. Both are amazing. Just make sure you prioritize your safety, be authentically yourself, and you just do what's best for you. And that will keep changing. Remember, like, it's never one thing. Things are always changing.
This idea of gut feeling, I actually wanted to ask you, what if you were unsure about your, I know it says unsure about your gut feeling, but you can't really, but I mean, I'm talking about from a friend's perspective who is like, look, I mean, she's pretty young, so I guess I should say, like, not quite friend, being in my 30s, and she's kind of 15 at the time, at the moment. She's like, look, I don't know who I am, forget like in terms of that, but I don't know whether this, you know, this feeling I have is just because I'm admiring people. Like, for example, she's like, do I find other girls hot because they're just good looking? Do I fit into this idea? Like, am I now bi because of thing? Am I kind of pansexual because sometimes I just don't have anything at all, you know? But I know I'd like men majorly. I don't know where I fit into that. I don't forget about bringing it up to like other people and how I'm going to navigate that. I don't know how to navigate what I am. I don't know what my air quote gut feeling is.
I'd say to have as many experience that you feel is naturally right. You know, if you find someone attractive, then go for it, because, you know, you might like it or you might not like it, you know, and it's like that with every relationship. You know, if it's a bad relationship, you learn from it, you learn what you like, what you don't like, and then you find more of what you like in the next relationship as well. So I think I'd say just, you know, go with the flow and have as many experiences as you want to have, you know, and don't do anything that you don't want to, obviously. Just go with the flow.
Don't worry about labels. It's a journey, as everyone said. You might find that, oh, you're attracted to both, or you're not really sure of either, so it's about exploring, and you can change later on the way. I've had friends who thought they were bi but actually turned out to be gay, or the other way around, where they were in a bi relationship or in a gay relationship, but it didn't work out, and now they're happily married in a hetero straight relationship, and so what. So it's about a journey. You don't have to put yourself in a pigeonhole or a label, and as well have to like literally put down on the stamp on the form being like, right, I think I'm bi, right, that box is ticked, or gay or whatever it may be. And again, there's so many facets to the LGBTQ plus community that you might find out that you're interested in trans people and going into pansexuality and everything else. So everything could be quite fluid, and that's what it should be about.
And you don't owe anyone any explanation, as long as you aren't hurting anyone in the process. You know, it's your experience to have and to own, and it's your story, and that will keep changing throughout, you know, months and years. But yeah, just be true to yourself.
Exactly. Like, what I was just going to say is that same thing, like, it's just all about self. Our whole life is nothing but rediscovering yourself. I'm 24 going on 25, and I'm rediscovering myself. Like, just this morning I had epiphanies and was like, I still have some insecurities I need to work through that I thought I left behind, but this weekend I learned I did not leave those insecurities behind. They really affected me. So, you know, it's just, that's all life is. It's trying new things and learning and growing and learning and growing
and making more mistakes.
So many mistakes. so many mistakes, so many, and that's what we're here to do. Yeah, and it's not that big of a deal. It's totally fine. Like, I think one example I would give somebody is like, so when I was like really like, I'm bi, which bi people exist, let's remember that. Personally, I'm not one of them, but at the time I was like, I'm bi. So what I realized, I would come home every time I was with a guy and I would just be like crying. And one day I finally was like really drunk and I was like, I don't even know why I thought to pray. I was like, oh, God, I am so sorry for like not being myself. Like, what am I doing? I'm clearly just really gay. And my friend was like, wait, you like, that was your prayer? I was like, yeah, well, like God made me this way and I'm like hating on myself. She was like, whoa, wait, I didn't think gay people could even talk to God like that. And I was like, well, drunk me did it. And here we are now, self-acceptance, growing, changing, making mistakes, alcohol. It's all part of the process.
I think God knows you more than anyone else. So there's just no point in keeping secrets anyway. So you talk to God how you want to, because God is closer to you than your own jugular vein.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, there you go.
I guess that's on the topic of kind of God and, you know, being queer. There's a lot of people that are kind of apprehensive about kind of either coming out or not necessarily even coming out. Sometimes they just like, I've come out, I just don't discuss it, because there's this fear of being cut off from faith-based systems, you know, whether that be a support system, whether that just be from, you know, the communities themselves. So like in the Muslim community, it's a big no-no. A lot of people I know, 3 that I can think of just on the top of my head, have literally been like, you know what, I feel like I've always been told, I've grown up knowing that being, being a queer, being gay is not Islamic. Like, it's not the quote Muslim thing to do. So in order to be true to myself, I'm just never going to marry. I'm never going to be in a relationship, because that way I'm not disowning either sides of me. And those are both faiths that my faith is something I'm feeling really strongly about. I am a Muslim, but I am also, interested in men.
So somebody can cut me off because I could go off on a whole tangent on this. I get a little too passionate. So I come from like a mixed religion background, which is already problematic in itself, I guess. My grandparents were not supposed to get married. I think I'm still learning more about the Hindu side of things when it comes to LGBTQ community. But on the Muslim side of things, I could write a whole essay for these people on why you can be queer and Muslim. And there is also a community out there. There is a masjid in Toronto, and they have an online Facebook group too that has like lots of good resources for queer Muslims. And it really just depends on also your interpretation of the Quran, I would say, because as I've been learning more about Sufism too, and the way gender is interpreted under like Sufi beliefs, then it's read where like the Quran is talking more less about like male and female like bodies, but more like in terms of energies. So like there's just like so many different arguments you can make that like if God is closer to you than your jugular vein, then like of course God would never abandon you. You were created this way. There's lots of arguments you can make. I think the whole thing is just finding the community where you feel accepted and where you feel safe to be yourself. Like queer Muslims exist, queer Hindus exist, queer Christians exist, Buddhists, Sikhs, Jains, like it's just about finding your community and unlearning the colonized version of our religions and reading the text in a way that we resonate with its interpretation.
Like with religious groups, they're always going to find something to pick on you anyway. So with talking about religion and sexuality, a lot of religions have come a long way in terms of accepting their queer members of the religion. I still remember when the church first accepted queer members of the church in C of E, and this was barely 20 years ago, 25 or 30 years ago. it's just a journey that we're going to make. I still remember when I wanted to reach out to the queer Muslim community in the UK, and this was a really long time ago, and it was kept all hush-hush and underground for everyone's safety. Now in the UK, we have at least 2 or 3 queer Muslim groups. They're marching in Pride every year, and I feel really proud. And even though there's some disagreements sometimes between 3 groups, as it is with every single group, I'm glad that the discussions are there. I'm glad that we're doing this little bit of bickering. Well, not really, but I'm glad that there's a difference of opinion. There's a difference of community. We're not all this monolith, but hopefully when we all get together, we will stand united and stick 2 fingers up to the rest of the homophobic community. And another thing is the media coverage, because I do remember when there was that debate against inclusive education in, I think, Manchester or Birmingham, I'm not too sure, one of those places outside the school gates. They showed a lot of pictures of the Muslim community battling against inclusive education. But at the forefront were Muslim groups, Muslim queer groups battling for inclusive education. But the newspapers did not report them. They actually labeled them as a South Asian group, not a Muslim group. So that just goes to show there's also quite a bit of imbalance on the way that we are represented.
Is that also, I would just tell people to remember that colonization really, really did impact our religious texts and the way they've been interpreted. And we must remember that things can get lost in translation unless you can read Sanskrit. It's really hard to find a good translation if you're looking at Hinduism, for example. So it's just important to also do your research and remember to unlearn everything we've been taught as kids, but really go through. It's your journey with God, no matter which version of God, which aspect of God you believe in. And it's your journey.
It's an exciting journey as well.
It really is. But I will say also, I think it is sometimes a little bit more difficult, especially when you're not the majority religion, within the LGBTQ community. Even then I'm sometimes ooh, I'm not trying to get hate crimes even within the queer community, you guys. So that's another thing you have to look out for.
I mean, when it came to being religious and queer, it actually spurred me to read the Quran by myself and keep sources open as well. So I've actually got a spreadsheet of certain chapters of the Quran, which I'm still working on. And I just used to read the Quran on my own at the bus stop. Sometimes I'd actually have my mini skirt on and stuff, and I would actually be reading the Quran, and people will come up to me and go, that's a Quran that you're reading there. And I'll be like, yeah, I just want to read the Quran. Leave me alone.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole different podcast on the right way to be Muslim, as if there is a right way or a wrong way. And I guess you guys spoke about support groups and things like that. Where can someone go? What are kind of these support groups for this kind of community that you guys have personally kind of benefited from?
So in the UK, there are tons of organizations and groups that you can reach to either just have a chat with people and find people who look like you, who speak the same language as you, who might have had the same journey as you. So you have entertaining spaces. Obviously, I'm going to say it because I work for them. You have Club Kali, which is a monthly club night, and they do online events as well. You have Gin UK, which is Games and Network. You have the NAZ Project London, who gives free sexual health advice, and you can go for them if you have any questions about sexual health. Because that's the thing also, you were talking about advice for young people. Knowledge is power. So as soon as you can, learn about sexual health and how to understand your body and how to protect yourself from whatever things you can catch when you're trying to explore and stuff like that. So tons of organizations. And also, we're very lucky to have an organizations like UK Black Pride that tailors also content and events for all LGBTQ people of color. Stonewall does amazing work as well. And and you have also Muslim groups, groups for Sikhs, groups for There's so many organizations out there. You just need to find them, Google them, and they exist already.
I'd just like to throw the group I started about a year ago now, Pink Mauritius International. I think someone mentioned that finding your community is very important for a base of support. And for myself, as a British Mauritian queer person living in the UK, I realized in hindsight that there was no community. There is a big Mauritian community and big queer communities, but no sort of space for the two to merge. And so last year, I created this Facebook group, which I'm hoping to grow a lot bigger.
If you want to pray, if you want to do Muslim prayers and Jumu'ah prayers, Eid prayers, I can recommend the Inclusive Mosque, the Inclusive Masjid Project. They are based in London, but I think sometimes they have groups up north as well. You've got also for Muslim groups, Imaan and Hidayah. There's also the London Queer Muslims. For the Sikh community, there's Sarbat. And there's also, I can't remember, but I do believe there is a Filipino queer group as well. Also, if you ever do get a chance to view certain pride marches, maybe on, say, for example, video recordings, a lot of the groups that were marching, there's a lot of community groups with their banners as well. So just look out for them. I know it's not really a good time to actually talk about pride at the moment, but there have been previous pride processions whereby there are listed groups, and if you can find those listed groups, then that's a good way to go in. Also, I'd like to promote my current campaign, because although I am brown, I am also gold in terms of mixed heritage. I am trying to start up a 9-stripe flag, which involves the gold stripe, which represents the East Asian community. It is on my Twitter page, which is JM_arrow. You are more than welcome to use it. You're more than welcome to decorate it with glitter. I just think it's nice to have a bit of gold on the flag. I'm not trying to push anyone away. I am actually just saying gold is great too. So yeah.
Yeah, great. I guess we'll kind of wrap this up. I guess first of all, thank you all so much for kind of coming and kind of sharing all your stories. I think it's been really great listening. And I think it's nice to know that you're not alone. I think a lot of people will kind of, take a lot out from this, and kind of a lot of experience that you have all shared will find it's actually shared experiences that they, maybe they found that I thought I was the only person that kind of went through this or felt this. I think that, I guess, just thanks for you guys for being brave and kind of coming out and sharing all the stories and being authentically and fabulously you. As I said, the podcast will go on, all networks. So it'll be on Spotify, it'll be on Apple iTunes, it'll be on Stitcher, Deezer. Although I only get like 3 listeners on Stitcher. So whoever those 3 people are, ironically, 2 of them are from Mauritius. So you two, you're my people, my Stitcher people. And obviously we're on Instagram, so it's @BoldBrownandBritish. I'll make sure to all the links and the kind of groups that you guys have mentioned, I'll make sure to put in the description of the podcast itself.
Thank you for having us over.
Thank you so much. It was great. Lovely to meet you all.
And thank you everyone as well.
It's been a pleasure.